In March 2011, the body of 45-year-old James Hawkins was discovered in the living room of his Greenville, South Carolina home. An investigation uncovered the shocking details of his double life, including an affair with a younger woman and a secret child. In February 2011, a series of events began that would ultimately lead to betrayal, murder, and scandal. On the quiet morning of March 6, 2011, the tranquility of Greenville was shattered by a desperate 911 call. Clara Hawkins, a 41-year-old woman known for her poised and caring demeanor, frantically reported that her husband, James Hawkins, had collapsed in their modest two-story home. Paramedics arrived within minutes to find James unresponsive in the living room, his lips tinted a haunting shade of blue. Clara, seated nearby, appeared distraught, clutching a throw blanket as if to shield herself from the chilling reality unfolding before her. The scene puzzled the first responders. There were no signs of trauma or immediate cause for alarm, but something felt off. James was pronounced dead at the scene, and his body was taken for further examination. The coroner's findings would soon unravel the mystery. James had been poisoned. Traces of cyanide, a deadly substance rarely encountered in small-town Greenville, were discovered in his system. The Hawkins home, once a picture of suburban stability, became the focus of a murder investigation that would expose secrets far darker than anyone could have imagined. James and Clara Hawkins had lived in Greenville for over a decade, a couple admired for their seemingly picture-perfect marriage. James, 45, was a charismatic insurance salesman whose outgoing personality and sharp suits made him a favorite among clients. Clara, 41, had once been a skilled nurse, but left her career behind to support James's demanding schedule and build a home they could both be proud of. Their story began in the late 1990s, when they met at a charity event in Houston, Texas. James was already making waves in his field, charming everyone in the room with his confidence and wit. Clara, younger and shy, had been drawn to his energy and drive. He often spoke of his dreams of building a life filled with success and comfort, a vision that resonated with Clara, who had always craved stability after growing up in a chaotic household. By 2000, James and Clara were married, settling into a modest home in Greenville. While their life together was not extravagant, it was comfortable. James's job provided well enough for the couple to enjoy small luxuries, a new car, occasional vacations, and expensive dinners at upscale restaurants. Clara, ever practical, took joy in these moments, believing they were signs of a growing and secure future. But beneath the surface, cracks began to form. By the 2005, Clara had noticed a change in James. His work trips grew longer, and his hours more unpredictable. At first, she attributed it to his ambition, the same drive that had captivated her years earlier. She didn't question the late-night calls, the unopened credit card statements, or the subtle shifts in his demeanor. James had a way of making her doubts seem irrational, brushing off her concerns with a quick laugh or a reassuring touch. It wasn't until 2009, a few months before their 10th wedding anniversary, that Clara began to sense something was seriously wrong. Their attempts to start a family had failed, leaving her feeling inadequate and isolated. She had quietly carried the pain of infertility, attending baby showers and offering polite congratulations to friends, while yearning for the child she and James had long hoped for. James, on the other hand, seemed detached, focusing instead on his career and social circles. The emotional distance between them widened. Clara started noticing the smallest inconsistencies, receipts for dinners she hadn't attended, faint traces of perfume on his shirts, and unexplained withdrawals from their joint account. She convinced herself it was nothing, that James was simply stressed or overworked. But the evidence became impossible to ignore when she stumbled upon a receipt tucked into the pocket of James's blazer one quiet evening in January 2011. It was for a diamond bracelet from an upscale jeweler in Houston. The date, December 22nd, 2010, stung like a slap. Clara's mind raced as she tried to recall what she had received for Christmas: an expensive, albeit impersonal, coffee maker. The receipt wasn't for her. Clara didn't confront James immediately. Instead, she spent weeks collecting her thoughts, replaying every suspicious moment in her mind. She remembered how James had started spending more time in Houston, under the guise of business meetings. She thought about the evenings he'd come home late, his excuses vague, and his affection absent. By February 2011, Clara could no longer suppress her suspicions. She hired a private investigator, a decision that filled her with both dread and determination. What followed was a revelation that shattered her world. The investigator discovered that James was not only having an affair, but had also fathered a child with a younger woman named Samantha Blake, who lived just an hour away. The affair had been going on for years, a secret life meticulously hidden from Clara. Samantha, in her late 20s, was everything Clara was not: young, carefree, and unburdened by the responsibilities of maintaining a household or a decades-long marriage. James had lavished Samantha with gifts, vacations, and promises of a future together. To Clara, the betrayal was a devastating blow, but it was the discovery of their child, a 5-year-old boy, with James's unmistakable features, that left her reeling. Clara's pain turned to fury when she uncovered even more. James had been secretly planning to divorce her, a move that would leave her with almost nothing. Emails retrieved from his laptop detailed conversations with his lawyer about revising their prenuptial agreement, ensuring that Clara would be financially cut off. She realized the man she had loved and sacrificed for was willing to discard her as though she were nothing more than an obstacle. The knowledge consumed her, but Clara kept her findings hidden. On the surface, she played the role of a supportive wife, all while grappling with the unbearable truth. Every interaction with James became a test of her composure. She watched him laugh, work, and carry on with his double life, her stomach churning with anger and betrayal. By March 1st, 2011, Clara had reached her breaking point. The image of Samantha's child haunted her, a stark reminder of what she would never have with James. Her heartbreak turned to resolve, and she began to consider what no one in Greenville would ever have expected of her. What would happen next would shock the town and unravel a series of events that would make the Hawkins family infamous. By the early February 2011, Clara's life had already begun to unravel, but nothing could prepare her for the depth of James's betrayal. The receipt for the diamond bracelet had set her suspicions ablaze, and the quiet but methodical work of the private investigator confirmed what her heart feared most. James, the man she had loved and supported for over a decade, was leading a double life. The investigator provided detailed findings. James had been in a long-term relationship with a younger woman named Samantha Blake. Samantha was a striking woman in her late 20s, with long, dark hair and an air of carefree confidence that seemed to embody everything Clara no longer felt about herself. She lived in a charming but modest home in the neighboring town of Brookville, just an hour's drive from Greenville. The home had been purchased by James, a detail Clara discovered through the investigators' meticulous digging. The revelation that James had a mistress was devastating enough, but the news that they shared a child, a 5-year-old boy named Evan, was the final blow. The child's age was a painful reminder of how long James's lies had persisted. Clara recalled how she had once spent endless nights crying over her inability to conceive, blaming herself for their empty nursery. Meanwhile, James had been building a secret family elsewhere. The investigator provided pictures of James playing with Evan at a park, holding the boy's hand as they walked together. Clara stared at the photos for hours, her emotions swinging between anguish and fury. She saw the joy on James's face, a kind of happiness he no longer showed at home. It was as if he had been living two lives, one with her, filled with growing resentment and coldness, and another with Samantha, where he appeared to be the man Clara had fallen in love with years ago. But the discoveries didn't end there. As Clara delved deeper into James's secret world, she unearthed emails and documents that revealed something even more sinister. On the February 14th, 2011, a cruel irony that didn't escape her, Clara found correspondence between James and his lawyer, outlining plans for divorce. James was preparing to leave her, not just emotionally, but financially. He intended to file for separation within the year and had been working to shield his assets from Clara. The emails detailed James's attempts to revise their prenuptial agreement, ensuring that Clara would walk away with nothing. He had also been liquidating joint accounts and transferring money into a private fund. The life insurance policy, which listed Clara as the beneficiary, was one of the few assets he hadn't yet altered. The $100,000 payout was still in her name, a small mercy in the midst of an overwhelming storm. Clara kept this knowledge to herself, unwilling to let James see the storm brewing within her. She became more withdrawn, retreating into her thoughts while maintaining the facade of a dutiful wife. She continued to cook his meals, fold his laundry, and even laugh at his tired jokes, all while plotting her next move. By late February 2011, Clara's pain had curdled into cold resolve. She had spent years sacrificing her dreams, enduring heartbreak, and building a life she believed was shared equally. Now, stripped of her illusions, she decided she would not let James ruin her completely. She began to research poisons, an unsettling interest she kept hidden behind the guise of ordinary household tasks. Clara's background as a nurse gave her a rudimentary understanding of toxic substances, but cyanide stood out as the most effective option. It was swift, deadly, and difficult to detect without a specific test. Under the guise of pest control for their garden, she ordered a small amount from an online supplier. The package arrived on the February 25th, 2011, unremarkable in its brown wrapping, but to Clara, it represented the beginning of her plan. Over the next week, Clara tested her method carefully. She began lacing small doses of cyanide into James's evening bourbon. The doses were non-lethal, but enough to cause mild symptoms that James dismissed as indigestion or fatigue. Each night, as he sipped his drink and read his emails or watched television, Clara watched him closely, her face expressionless, but her mind racing. On the night of March 5th, 2011, Clara executed the final step of her plan. She prepared James's drink as usual, adding a dose of cyanide large enough to ensure it would be his last. She handed him the glass with steady hands, her voice calm, as they exchanged brief, mundane pleasantries. James had no reason to suspect anything was amiss. The morning of March 6, 2011, began with chaos as paramedics declared James dead on the scene. The police arrived shortly after, led by Detective Arthur Green and his partner, Detective Linda Reynolds. The detectives were seasoned professionals, known for their methodical approach to solving even the most perplexing cases. The autopsy results on March 8, 2011, confirmed their suspicions. James had been poisoned with cyanide. The detectives began their investigation by interviewing Clara, who played the role of a grieving widow with remarkable conviction. She described James's recent health complaints as minor and denied any knowledge of marital troubles. As the investigation progressed, the detectives uncovered James's double life. Samantha Blake was brought in for questioning on March 15, 2011. She appeared shaken but cooperative, admitting to her relationship with James and revealing his plans to leave Clara. Samantha denied any involvement in his death, stating that James had promised to handle the divorce amicably. The turning point in the investigation came on March 20th, 2011, when forensic analysis of the Hawkins home revealed a bottle of bourbon laced with cyanide. Clara's fingerprints were the only ones found on the bottle, a detail that immediately raised suspicion. The detectives revisited Clara, their questions more pointed this time. Her calm demeanor faltered slightly, but she continued to maintain her innocence. However, the mounting evidence painted a damning picture. Clara, driven by betrayal and desperation, had meticulously planned and executed her husband's murder. What had begun as a seemingly tragic and unexpected death now unraveled into a story of deceit, betrayal, and cold-blooded revenge. As the pieces fell into place, the once respected Hawkins household became the center of a scandal that would captivate Greenville for months to come. By March 25, 2011, the evidence against Clara Hawkins was too overwhelming for authorities to ignore. Detectives Arthur Green and Linda Reynolds, after weeks of painstaking investigation, made the decision to arrest Clara at her Greenville home. That morning was marked by a heavy, somber silence. Clara, still dressed in her housecoat, opened the door to find the detectives standing there, with grave expressions. The arrest was methodical, professional, but deeply unsettling. Neighbors peered through curtains and gathered on porches, murmuring in shock as Clara was led out in handcuffs. To many in Greenville, Clara had been a kind and devoted wife, a woman whose calm demeanor and quiet resilience seemed unshakable. The sight of her being escorted to the waiting police car was like a crack in the image of a perfect life, a reminder that no one really knew what went on behind closed doors. At the police station, Clara maintained her composure during questioning, though there was an unmistakable weariness in her eyes. She answered the detectives' questions calmly, sticking to her narrative of being a grieving widow. But the forensic evidence, particularly the bottle of bourbon laced with cyanide, left little room for doubt. Clara was formally charged with the murder of her husband, James Hawkins. Her arrest sent shockwaves through the community. News outlets picked up the story quickly, painting Clara as the bourbon widow. Speculation about her motives ranged from cold-blooded greed to justified vengeance. As more details of James's infidelity and secret life surfaced, public opinion began to shift. Clara was no longer just a suspect. She was a woman scorned, betrayed, and left with nothing but heartbreak and bitterness. The trial began on May 2, 2011, at the Greenville County Courthouse. It was a spectacle, drawing crowds of reporters, curious residents, and legal observers. The courtroom was packed each day, with onlookers craning their necks to catch a glimpse of Clara. Dressed in modest attire and wearing minimal makeup, she sat silently as the proceedings unfolded, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Her stoic demeanor became a focal point, with many interpreting it as a sign of her strength and dignity in the face of humiliation. The defense team, led by seasoned attorney Rachel Porter, crafted a narrative that played on the public's growing sympathy for Clara. They painted a picture of a woman pushed to the brink by years of emotional abuse, betrayal, and manipulation. Evidence of James's double life, his long-term affair with Samantha Blake, and the child he had fathered, was laid bare for the jury to see. The defense emphasized how James had planned to divorce Clara, leaving her penniless after years of loyal support. Rachel Porter described Clara's actions as those of a woman driven to desperation, not malice. She argued that Clara had spent years sacrificing her own happiness for James, only to discover that he had been building a separate life filled with the things she had always wanted: love, a child, and financial security. The defense claimed that Clara's decision to poison James was not premeditated murder, but a moment of profound emotional collapse, born from unbearable betrayal. On the other side, the prosecution painted a starkly different picture. Assistant District Attorney Mark Tremblay argued that Clara's actions were cold, calculated, and deliberate. The use of cyanide, a rare and highly lethal substance, demonstrated planning and intent. Tremblay pointed to the weeks Clara spent researching poisons and the methodical way she had administered the fatal dose. He described her as a woman who, rather than walking away, chose to take her husband's life to ensure she would remain financially secure. The trial's most emotionally charged moments came when witnesses took the stand. Samantha Blake, the mistress, appeared visibly shaken as she recounted her relationship with James and his promises to leave Clara. She denied any involvement in the murder, but admitted that James's duplicity had likely pushed Clara over the edge. Clara herself never testified. Her defense team believed her silence spoke louder than any words could. Her expression throughout the trial remained neutral, though observers noted how her gaze lingered on photographs of James and his secret son presented as evidence. It was a haunting reminder of the life she had never been able to have. On June 15, 2011, after weeks of testimony and 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Clara Hawkins was guilty of manslaughter, not murder. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as the decision was read. Some believed justice had been served, while others felt Clara's sentence was too lenient. For Clara, the verdict was a bittersweet victory. She avoided a life sentence, but still faced the reality of prison. During sentencing on June 20th, 2011, the judge handed Clara a 5-year sentence, citing the mitigating circumstances of her emotional state and the years of betrayal she had endured. Clara accepted the sentence without visible reaction. She was escorted from the courtroom, her head held high, while reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed. Prison life for Clara was harsh, but not unbearable. She spent her time reading, reflecting, and even mentoring younger women who faced struggles of their own. Letters from strangers poured in, some condemning her actions, others offering support. Her story became a symbol of both caution and resilience, sparking debates about morality, justice, and the limits of human endurance. On March 25, 2016, exactly 5 years after her arrest, Clara was released from prison. She walked out of the facility with few possessions, but a quiet determination to rebuild her life. Despite everything, Clara retained the $100,000 life insurance payout. James's plans to change the beneficiary had never been finalized, and the money became both a blessing and a reminder of the man she had loved and lost in the most tragic way. Clara moved to a new town, far from Greenville, to start over. She lived modestly, using the insurance money to fund a quiet existence. Her story lingered in the public consciousness for years, a tale of love, betrayal, and the lengths to which a person might go when pushed to their breaking point. For Clara, the end of her marriage marked not just the death of a man, but the rebirth of her own strength. The story ends with a reflection on the complexities of love, betrayal, and justice. Clara's actions sparked debates in the community, with some viewing her as a victim pushed to the edge and others as a cold-blooded killer. The final scene shows Clara in her new life, clutching a photograph of herself and James from happier times.